This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Here's Stephen Sinclair from Jackson's on George.
In general, Westholme, I use several items on the menu from them. I always look to source products for their flavour. And with Westholme, I think they deliver that 100%. Australian Wagyu, in particular, Westholme is world class. Westholme is recognised for their quality all over the world. And then that's why, and when I tried it, and I absolutely love the flavour. This is, why I decided to put them on the menu.
Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
The stories we will hear today come from the land of the Bidwell, Yuin, Gunai-Kurnai and Nagario people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
There's a real sort of sense of appreciation locally for locally produced, locally grown, locally made wines, and to be able to drive around and deliver to the pubs and restaurants, there's a real appreciation for all things local. It's just really satisfying to be part of all of that.
In today's episode, we head into East Gippsland to visit with Rob Lightfoot from Lightfoot Wines. Together with his brother Tom and founding father, the family are making an array of modern and classical wines with plenty of heart and soul. Hi Rob, thanks for joining me.
Hi Shanteh. Thanks for having me on.
It's so nice to hear your voice and to see your face again. How have you been?
I've been very well. Yeah, we've been busy down here in East Gippsland, but things are looking good.
That's very nice to hear, seeing as you've had a couple of challenging years. You grew up in Gippsland, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I was born and bred in Gippsland, East Gippsland, Bairnsdale specifically. So yeah, I've had a lot of time in Gippsland. I haven't always lived here, but there's something about Gippsland that keeps drawing you back.
Well, you're the perfect person to talk about East Gippsland with. Now, your parents actually planted a vineyard in 1995, the Myrtle Point Vineyard. Tell me, what was life like growing up where your parents had this amazing vineyard?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of an odd one, really, because they bought the farm a few years earlier to farm cattle, and then we found out we had this Terra Rosa over limestone soil, and on the vineyard and on the farm, and so then all of a sudden we changed direction and became grape growers. And so for my two brothers and I, that was really quite an exciting time. We got to learn a lot about, driving tractors and, working in the vineyard. And, it was really interesting. And we were sort of right at that age, sort of early to mid high school where, we were able to help out a lot in the vineyard. And, I really enjoyed it.
I think anything, especially for that kind of age, anything that's kind of physical work, because you've got a lot of energy at that time. Did you enjoy doing a lot of that kind of stuff? Were you interested in the end product, or were you kind of just grape growers and then on selling it at that time?
No, we were definitely just grape growers, and we were selling the fruit. Look, I enjoyed the work, but I think as time went on, I sort of got a bit of an inclination that maybe vineyard work wasn't really for me. It was, look, there were some pretty long days and some pretty mundane tasks, and I guess I really sort of, my interest started to go in other directions, but my brother Tom really got into it. In fact, so much so that he then, when he finished school, he went on to study viticulture and winemaking, and he's really gone down the path of learning all about it, whereas I sort of found myself going in a different direction that was maybe more down the sort of sales and marketing path.
Well, I can understand that because, I mean, when you see people slogging it out in a vineyard and you think, oh, is that what I want to do forever? Especially when you're young and you probably want to go to a party and get out and see big towns and cities. You worked in an Italian bottle shop through your university days, and then you did some travel overseas. Tell me about kind of what started to bring you back around to thinking wine was kind of cool.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I didn't ever sort of, when I left Gippsland, and I don't think I really thought I would have a career in wine or viticulture or anything like that. But I think having the experience growing up with the vineyard and there was just something about wine, and I guess having that sort of base level of knowledge that just kind of kept drawing me back in. So, as you said, when I got a part-time job when I was at uni, it was in a bottle shop in Lygon Street in Melbourne, and I guess I kept gravitating back towards jobs that had some kind of connection to wine, whether it was hospitality or later on in sales. There was always just a connection to wine, and I think it's true of a lot of people in the industry that once you start learning about wine and you're interested in wine, it sort of keeps drawing you back in, even if it's from different angles or in different ways, or you have pauses in your life and you're doing something else. But it's funny how you keep coming back around, to wine, and I think it's just because you love it at the end of the day, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that maybe it's not till we're older that we kind of start to make those connections and we can see that thread and we can, join the dots and go, oh, that was something that I kept coming back to. But, at the time, you may not kind of really realize that, I think. So in 2007, your brother and you decided to take on the family estate. Tell me about kind of those decisions then.
Yeah, that was interesting because back in the early 2000s when Mum and Dad were managing the vineyard and selling the fruit, it was actually pretty hard going. There was not a lot of knowledge about Gippsland fruit or Gippsland wine, and the industry as a whole was in a bit of a tough spot. There was an oversupply of fruit and prices were low, and so it wasn't a great time to be a fruit grower. And I think it was made extra hard because people just didn't really know about Gippsland, and Gippsland fruit wasn't really sought out. We had initially had a contract with South Corp that was supposed to be for 10 years, and that ended quite prematurely. Both parties were sort of happy to walk away from that one, and so Mum and Dad really got to the point where they were sort of thinking, well, is there a future in this vineyard in Gippsland? Should they're starting to think about retirement, and my brother Tom and I were thinking, well, we'd both been away from the area for nearly 10 years, and my brother Tom had been working over in Oregon in the Willamette Valley, doing a lot of working with a lot of Pinot there, and every time he came back, he was convinced that we had the right vineyard, we had the right climate and soils. Our vineyard is more than 50% Pinot, and he was convinced that, just because we were having trouble selling the fruit doesn't mean we shouldn't be really valuing it ourselves and trying to do more with it ourselves. So that sort of prompted this idea that, well, maybe we should come home, maybe we should take on the vineyard, but to do that, we really need to go a step further and start making wine ourselves. And so that's when we really shifted our focus from just being fruit growers to also then winemakers as well. And it did feel like a really big call at the time because it was not easy sort of growing fruit and trying to sell it to then sort of double down and go, well, we're not just going to do that. We're now going to invest in winemaking equipment and sort of go all in and just see whether, it's really going to work or not. And I think all of us, Mum and Dad, Tom, myself, we're all pretty nervous about making that decision. But I think at the end of the day, we really wanted to just know, well, can we make a go of it or can't we? And we didn't really want to, we didn't want to die wondering.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to kind of, in hindsight, say, oh, we went for it and we did this. But yeah, at the time, it is a huge risk. But I suppose the other side of it is, well, do we give up and plant something else? And do we take out all this work that your parents have done for so long? So what was the plan when you guys took over in 2007? What did you think? I mean, luckily that your brother had some experience in Pinot, but is that what you thought this is going to be, the way forward? What was the plan for the wines that you made in those early days?
Well, I think it was a fairly naive plan looking back. I was working at Brown Brothers in their marketing department and had some experience as a sales rep, and Tom had obviously done a lot of work in vineyards and wineries, both in Australia and Oregon, and we thought, well, if we come back, I can do the sales and marketing, you can do the viticulture and winemaking, and that'll be that. Pretty straightforward. And looking back now, it seems naive to think it would just be all that simple. But we were actually very fortunate around then that Alistair Butt moved to the area, and he contacted us one day and said, I'm a winemaker. Do you have any work for a winemaker? And he'd come from Seville Estate in the Yarra and had a lot of experience working with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so that really helped us out, because we were then able to have 3 people instead of just 2, but we were able to really focus on, like, I can do the sales and marketing, Tom can do the viticulture, Alistair can do the winemaking, and we can each sort of focus on our areas. But of course, we were starting a wine brand from zero. So I think the first year we made 3 barrels of Chardonnay, and that was it. And then the next year we made a bit more, and so we were still trying to sell the fruit, the fruit we had, because we've got just under 80 acres of vineyard. So we had, it was a fair bit of fruit to try and move each year. But then every year we just made a bit more wine. We sold a bit less fruit. And, these days we don't sell fruit at all. And, it's a totally different scenario. These days it's very hard to buy fruit from Gippsland from anywhere. But, back then it was sort of hard to move it. So, that was the way it worked out. And it was just fortunate that, the interest in Pinot has really grown year on year from there. And because we're a very Pinot-centric producer, we sort of found ourselves in the right place at the right time, I guess.
It's crazy because Pinot is known for being one of the most finicky and hard to make wines, and yet, what a success story for you guys. Tell me a little bit about East Gippsland, the kind of the climate and the kind of, soils that you guys are on.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we've got this Terra Rosa over limestone soil, which is quite unusual in East Gippsland, but there are chunks of it that follow the Mitchell River as it sort of winds down from the high country and goes towards the Gippsland Lakes. And I think the other important factors of us growing Pinot here are that we're quite close to the coast, so we get a lot of southeasterly breezes throughout the growing period, and that really helps keep the temperature down in the vineyard and keeps the air moving through the canopy of the vines and sort of reduces the disease pressure. But I think one of the things that's different about East Gippsland is, as opposed to the rest of Gippsland, is that we're sort of in a rain shadow from the Great Dividing Range. So the Great Dividing Range is immediately to our north, and we've got Bass Strait to our south, and we're sort of sandwiched in the middle. And while a lot of Gippsland, particularly South Gippsland, gets quite high annual rainfalls, as the weather patterns come across from the west, the rain tends to peter out by the time it comes to east. So that really helps us with managing disease pressure type problems in the vineyard, because, as you said, Pinot is very sensitive, to everything basically. And if you can keep it a bit drier through the growing season, that can really help, problems like botrytis and everything else. So the big issue that we do have is that we're then susceptible to East Coast lows. So, we can get a big rain event sort of track down the coast from Sydney, and we can get, 200 mils of rain in one hit. And, if that happens in March, we're in all sorts of trouble. But generally speaking, if we can avoid the East Coast lows, it's a really good place to grow grapes.
You highlighted a couple of challenges, and we do know that, being in such a large area with so much forestry, there can be lots of challenges. But what are the positives of being kind of so remote and being so, surrounded by the beauty that you live in?
Well, excuse me, there's a lot to love about East Gippsland. As you said, it's a really physically beautiful place. I think something like 80 to 90% of East Gippsland is either national park or state forest. So it's a really sort of wild wilderness area. And we've got the Gippsland Lakes district, the Gippsland Lakes, which is a huge inland lake system. It's something like 400 square kilometres of lakes. So it's a really big draw card for visitors to the area. There's lots of boating and fishing and everything else. But I think for me, running a winery in East Gippsland, one of the biggest advantages is there's a really strong sense of, I don't know if you describe it as community or support within Gippsland for all things Gippsland. So, around us, we've got lots of vegetable growing. We've got great dairy. There's a big commercial fishing fleet out of Lakes Entrance, and all these sort of things combine to make, I think, people are quite proud of Gippsland, and you see on the restaurant menus that, there's Gippsland grass-fed beef, or there's locally caught seafood, or there's cheeses that are from all the specialty producers we have in Gippsland, and seasonal vegetables from the Lindenow Valley, and as winemakers, we're able to sort of join in on that as well. And I think, maybe we're a bit late to the party on that, but it's been fully embraced now, and people are really embracing that support of local, having local ingredients on the menus, local wines, local beers. And because Gippsland's, it's a big area, but it's got all of those elements. There's a lot of pride in Gippsland, and a lot of people wanting to showcase all the local produce. And that's really encouraging, that local support.
Oh, that's for sure. It's one of the reasons why once I came to visit, I felt like, I could easily not leave and just become a bit of a hermit, because you've got everything that I require: good cheese, good meat, good wine, and just the beauty of the place. And it's so diverse. Like this, like you said, you've got lake systems, you've got high alpine country, you've got incredible beaches, forestry, like everything. And I just think, I can see why sometimes people dreading having to go into the city and having to leave their beautiful home.
Yeah. And I think when you grow up in a place like this, you don't fully appreciate it. And then, I know for both my brother and I, we were away for nearly 10 years each. And then you come back and you see it with a whole new appreciation. And it really is a beautiful place.
That's for sure. Rob, what do you love most about what you do?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think there's lots to love, but I think being part of a small family business is, I love it because it's so diverse. So my week is just different all the time. So, when we're picking grapes, we're all picking grapes. When we're working on the bottling line, we're all working on the bottling line. I spend 1 or 2 days a week out in the delivery van, dropping off our wine to local pubs and restaurants. And I think that diversity really, really keeps it interesting. There's just so many different facets to running a vineyard, running a winery, selling wine, trying to promote the wine, that you're always kind of doing something a little bit different. And I really like that sort of variability, that every week's a bit different, and it's different through the different stages of the year. And that I think the other thing that I really like is that there's a real sort of sense of appreciation locally for locally produced, locally grown, locally made wines. And, to be able to drive around and deliver to the pubs and restaurants, there's a real appreciation for all things local that, it's just really satisfying to be part of all of that.
And in terms of your parents' dream, what does it mean to them, do you think, that you've carried their dream forward and made it possible?
I think they're quite proud of it all. I think they still live on the farm. They come up to the winery every day. They have a coffee in the cellar door and have a look around what's happening, and chat to everyone. And that they're always across everything that's happening. And I think they get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And it's, I guess it's something that has brought us all a bit closer as a family, because, Tom had moved overseas to work in vineyards. I'd moved away to work, and it was really the idea of starting a family wine brand and making wine that sort of drew us all back to Bairnsdale.
Beautifully said. That's perfect, Rob. Thank you so much. I have really loved hearing a little bit about your story. And, you could be making wine, you could be doing your job anywhere else. I think that to have that gravitation back home and to to be making wines now from that original Myrtle Point vineyard that was planted by your parents is so special. And I think Gippsland is very lucky to have you and your brother Tom.
Yeah, well, we certainly wouldn't want to be doing it anywhere else.
The vast land of Gippsland has everything you could ever want in your glass. And yet the diverse municipalities have their own identity and culture. It's a wondrous land you just have to taste and see to believe. But be warned, you might never want to leave. Visit winegippsland.com to find out more. This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.